my privilege to introduce Lynda J. Bergh, a native of Orange County, California, who has worked in the investigation industry for 42 years and obtained her private investigator license and began doing business as LJB Investigations in June 1996. Prior to entering the PI field, Ms. Herring was employed in law enforcement and also danced professionally, having originally studied to be a ballerina. She possesses a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and psychology and a master's degree in public administration. She describes herself as a general investigator and conducts many types of investigations, including but not limited to asset searches, background checks, due diligence, cyber crimes, online reputation, elder abuse, fraud, traffic accident, social media, personal injury, and cellular forensics. Lynda is a contributing author of multiple books, including Advanced Private Investigation, and it's all about showing up. And her article, How Well Do You Know Your Child, was recently published in Kids Zone magazine.
I forgot what I wrote.
Her first solo publication, Your Amazing Itty Bitty Keep Your Children Safe book, is scheduled for release in January 2025. Lynda's passion lies in the fight against sex trafficking and sextortion, especially of children. She presents virtual and in-person workshops to children and adults regarding online exploitation and how to protect children from online predators, while also conducting investigations into human trafficking, sextortion, and missing children. Please help me welcome Lynda J. Bergh.
Thank you. So I'm going to skip like 2 screens right from the start because all of that was in there. I know. So thank you very much for being here. It's an honor to be here talking to you. I do also investigate elder abuse. I know that sounds like it's all about kids, but kids are my passion, but there are also other things. As far as I'm concerned, you do not mess with a child or an older person. The ones that cannot take care of themselves need our help. So that's what I do. So we're going to cover a little bit about protecting seniors and those who care for them. I'm going to talk about protecting your loved ones from elder abuse, tips to recognize an online predator, which works for anybody, any age, online privacy settings, romance, catfishing, and phishing scams, which you've probably heard of most of those, and what to do if you suspect elder abuse, because that's really important. And now, this is all about me, so I'm not going to say it because he just did. When I was hired to be an investigator in December of 1982, the investigator that hired me, she did mostly workers' comp investigations, so people with, phony work-related injuries. Every now and then she would get a different case. She got a missing child case a couple weeks after she hired me, and we worked on that. It was a 10-year-old little girl who was kidnapped by her uncle, who brutally raped her multiple times over a 72-hour time period, and then sold her to his friends for sex. It took us like a week and a half to find her. Can you imagine how long that was for her? And that's what got me hooked on doing anything to protect children in particular. And they didn't call it trafficking then, but that's exactly what it was. When I work on cases like that, I stay in contact with the family as long as they want me to be in contact. I'm still friends with that little girl 42 years later, which is kind of cool. So she's awesome. She's an amazing, I would say she's an amazing young lady. She's in her 50s. but anyway, yeah, I'm still in contact with her. So enough about me. What is elder abuse? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention defines elder abuse as an intentional act or failure to act that causes or creates a risk of harm to an older person. An older person is only 60 years old. I was doing this and I'm like, I'm way in that category now. It's not fair. I thought you used to be really old before they called you that, but okay, 60 and up, you're officially an elder. Elder abuse includes physical abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial exploitation, neglect, abandonment. Perpetrators include pretty much anyone, often children or other family members, unfortunately, the people you should be able to trust, spouses, as well as staff at nursing homes, assisted living, and other facilities. So we're going to kind of go over some of these types of abuse. Physical abuse, you can kind of guess. Intentional or reckless use of physical harm or physical coercion that may result in bodily injury, physical pain, or impairment. I've had some cases where I had to do wellness checks on elderly people that were in care facilities. And I tell my clients on cases like that, if your family member is in a facility, pop in and visit at weird times. Don't go at the same time every day. I had one family where the person I was checking on was in her late 80s. Her husband had died many, many, many years prior, and she was getting huge death benefits. And one day, the insurance company got a phone call from a guy who did not really identify himself properly, saying, oh, got to change the address you're mailing those checks to. And he didn't really explain. Really, it was totally legit, but they didn't know that to start with. So I was hired to go out and check and make sure this lady was okay. I did. I went out there to explain why I was there, and the guy's like, oh, what an idiot. You know, I just didn't explain who I was. It was her son-in-law. He was former law enforcement, which made it even worse that he didn't say what he should have said. But I told him, I said, I'm going to have to come out and visit like every 3 months. That's what they want me to do. He's like, okay. The family was very cool about it. After about a year, they did have to place her in a facility because they could not care for her on their own anymore. So we checked out a couple facilities. They went to one that was close to their house because they wanted to visit every day. And they went and had dinner with her every day. Well, the next time I was going to go visit, I went at breakfast time. And she was slumped over in the corner in a wheelchair, drugged out of her mind. Messy, looked like she hadn't had a bath. Terrible. So I called them and I said, someone needs to get here right now. You need to move her. And that, unfortunately, is very, very common in facilities like that. So I always say, don't go for the same meal every day. Don't go the same time of day. And that was, it wasn't really physical pain, but they were not taking care of her at all. And it took 3 tries before they found a place that she got really good care up until she passed away. And I visited her every 3 months for years. So, but, you know, they can, sometimes it's tricky to, you know, move, they have to be moved or assisted moving around, and sometimes people can pull or tug or push or, you know, and can injure them. Some of us bruise easily. So it's, you know, got to be careful. And then there's also, you know, unlawful, excessive, or unnecessary use of force like restraints or force feeding. Force feeding, unfortunately, is really common because sometimes they just don't want to eat. We all have days we don't want to eat. Can you imagine someone forcing you to eat? That's terrible. And then over-medication or under-medication, that's what they were doing with this lady. She was just so medicated, she had no clue who I was. And the rest of the time, she acted like I was one of her grandchildren. So it was like, I mean, she knew who I was for sure. So, very sad. It gets worse. Sexual abuse. We all hear those nightmare stories about people that get arrested for inappropriately touching or doing whatever to patients in facilities. And that's something sometimes in a facility, sometimes it's during in-home care. So, you know, the examples include unwanted touching, sexual assault or battery, sexual harassment, sexual interaction with elders who lack the capacity to give consent, emotional or psychological abuse, the infliction of anguish, pain, or distress through verbal or nonverbal acts, you know, yelling and screaming at them for no reason. People that are caring for these people should be patient and warm and loving, and they should not intimidate them or humiliate them or isolate them. Neglect. My father was subjected to this towards the end of his life. And that would include the refusal or failure of a caregiver or fiduciary to fulfill any part of the person's obligations or duties, which include, you know, feeding them, taking care they have what they need. My dad basically starved to death. So it's another thing that can happen. You need to stay on top of, you know, we hope anyone that's elderly that's being cared for has someone around them that cares about them. And that can be tricky. For sure, unfortunately, some don't. They don't all have family members, but hopefully there's someone. It's very important. Financial. This is the one that I encounter the most, is financial, as you might guess. And that's, you know, illegally using the person's resources, either monetary or otherwise. They might be, you know, taking the person's car and driving it when they're not supposed to. Oftentimes, the caregiver or a family member, the perpetrator, whoever, because, you know, there's a lot of caregivers that are wonderful human beings, obviously, that do a great job. But whoever is there doing the caregiving sometimes tries to coerce them into signing over their bank accounts or giving them access to their bank accounts to make them a beneficiary on a life insurance policy or an IRA or something like that. Or they'll say they're going to go shopping and, I need $100 to go get, a $5 thing. And they come back with the $5 thing and there's no change. Or they need $100 for something, money for a $100 thing, and they get $1,000 and they bring back no change. So they kind of stockpile the money. I had a case with a friend whose sister had taken a bunch of jewelry, very, very valuable jewelry, that she borrowed from their mom and never brought back. It was almost $1 million worth of stuff. And she kept saying, I don't know where it is. And then she said, well, mom loaned it to me. It went to this formal event because we found pictures of her wearing some of it online. And it ended up she sold it. And it was very sentimental. They were more concerned about the sentimental value than the monetary value. And then, of course, mom, I'm kind of jumping all over right now, but anyway, the mom didn't want to prosecute her daughter. And that is often a problem, too, in cases like this, where it's very obvious that abuse is happening. And it's like, that's my little girl. I don't care that she's a thief. I don't want her to go to jail. So she got away with it, which is terrible. And who knows who else she's going to do it to. So, and she started her own business doing caregiving. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. She's like, this was kind of fun. I made $1 million without too much work. Yeah. We heard that. And then I had another case recently with a caregiver who, she was an in-home caregiver. She turned into a girlfriend, which happens a lot. She's like 40. Her boyfriend is 87. And she went from, to start with, her caregiving duties were very minimal. And he was allowing her to live in the house free of charge while she provided these minor things. Well, then as she started doing a little bit more to help him and getting closer to him, all of a sudden she demanded to be paid, which was interesting. It's like, wait, I'm paying for everything for you, giving you everything that you want, and now you want to be paid. So she coerced him into buying a new car. He didn't drive at all. Doesn't drive, I should say. He's still around. He doesn't drive. She wanted a new car. So she talked him into buying a new car. And then she convinced him to send, I believe now the total at this point is $75,000 in increments of about $5,000 to her family in the Philippines. Because if it wasn't for him, she'd be home with them. So he needs to pay them because she's not there. And he thinks it's okay. He thinks this is all normal and that he's helping her family. And that's because she convinced him that that's what it is. So that is full-on elder abuse, obviously. Members of the family are kind of fighting amongst each other over whether or not they want to try to do anything about it because he's happy. And so that's another thing. He doesn't think anything bad is happening. He's very happy, and he thinks he's in love, and he thinks she's in love. So we figure as long as they don't get married, then it's kind of okay, because as long as he's happy. If they get married, then we know she's going to inherit everything he's got, and it's a lot. So they're trying to figure out a way to protect the family, which has businesses, and they've got all kinds of money. So it's an interesting case. It's been going on for several months, and I'm sure it's going to continue going on for quite some time. Phishing. Now, a lot of people of all ages fall for phishing. So these are usually initiated by a call or an email, or sometimes a text message, claiming that the victim owes money on a bad debt or owes on taxes, even though no such debts exist. But they will convince these people, oh, you owe all this money, and if you don't give me a credit card right this minute to pay this bill, there's someone outside your house that's going to arrest you. And they scare the people into giving them money, and it's very successful. It works a lot. I frequently would get calls from people, and they go, oh, yeah, I just got off the phone with this lady, and she said that I needed to make a payment on this thing, and I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's like, no, call me before you do it. Don't call me after you do it. And, sometimes they get their credit card information out of them, their social security number out of them. No one is ever, ever, ever going to call anybody and ask for their social security number. except Carlos, but that's for a legit reason.
For the application.
I said it was legit. But, you know, I am one of those elder people, and, you know. But, yeah, I mean, some stranger is not going to call you and want your Social Security number or your bank account numbers, and they convince people to give them their money. There's also emails claiming an address needs to be verified for a package delivery. That's a very common one right now. And it looks like, you know, they do a pretty good job at making the emails look legit. If you look at them really close, you can tell they're using a different font, but you really have to look. And, you know, older people, especially as they get older and older, don't know what to look for and may not necessarily have good enough eyesight to even read it.
Or the email that says at fedex@gmail.com.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some of them are really, really obvious, but others, it's not so obvious. And if they can't read it or they don't know, they'll fall for whatever the people tell them, which is very sad. And then also another thing, whatever you do, if someone calls you on the phone and says, "Hi, is this Marshall?" Do not say yes. Say, "Who is this?" or "Who wants to know?" Who wants to know is my response when someone asks me, because those things are being used by AI to mimic your voice and do other things and can result in financial fraud involving you. So just thought I'd throw that in. Doesn't matter how old you are for that one. Self-neglect. There's a lot of people as they get older that even though they can take care of themselves, they don't. They don't necessarily want to. Sometimes they're depressed and they just don't feel like it, or they think they're not worth it, which is really, really sad. So they don't eat. They don't properly clothe themselves. They kind of go from being totally fine to all of a sudden they can't do anything, even though they can. They just think that they can't, or they think they're not worth it. So that's where it comes in handy, checking on them, checking on people that you know, maybe helping them get a caregiver or someone to go in and help them a few days a week. We've got a couple neighbors that have someone that come in like once or twice a week to see them, just to make sure everything's okay. Abandonment. This happens a lot. Desertion of an older person by an individual who has assumed responsibility for providing care, or by a person with physical custody of an elder. In some states, that's considered a separate and unique form of elder abuse. That California is included. That is part of the statute. And it can occur anywhere, at a hospital, at a nursing home, or another public place. A lot of elderly people get abandoned after they're signed into hospice care, which is terrible. Like, you know, their spouse signs them in, just leave. And they might be, you know, fully lucid and know what's going on for who knows how long. Some people are in hospice care for months or even years. And, you know, they just walk away and go, "Oh, no, I'm done with that one." So how common is elder abuse? Research indicates that 1 in 10 older people living in the community experience some form of elder abuse in the United States. That doubled during the pandemic. And a lot of things doubled during the pandemic having to do with crime, sextortion and online exploitation, more than doubled. And that's because everyone was locked up in their homes with nothing to do other than try to figure out how to exploit someone. You know, the bad guys, not the good guys. So it's, you know, but they say 1 in 10. Individuals might experience multiple forms of abuse at the same time. And, you know, there's a lot of them. You could have, you know, a lot of them all at once. And obviously that has an effect on their entire life, no matter what's going on. And who are the abusers? When I first started investigating these a long time ago, I was stunned to see that most of the time it's a child, an adult child, especially when there's multiple siblings. You get one that decides they're going to be in charge of everything, and unfortunately, them being in charge of everything involves them often taking things that they should not take. It's very common. This says that it was nearly 47%, but from my experience, it's a lot higher than that. So they are the experts, but in Orange County, California, let's say it's higher than that. And then medical or non-family caregivers were perpetrators in about 13% of cases. And very few did not know their abuser at all. So you don't often get a stranger that comes and takes advantage. It's someone that's kind of wormed their way into your life somehow before they start taking advantage. And then what makes an older adult vulnerable? A lot of things, a whole lot of things. Just like when I talk about trafficking cases, I say the most dangerous place for a child to be right now is on the internet. It's the same for elderly, especially the really elderly people that are alone, that don't have someone around them, because they're lonely and they're bored and they're looking for love or companionship or attention or whatever they can find. So it's really the same for teenagers and for the elderly. And then if they have dementia or some other type of disability, they're especially vulnerable. And that's, people with dementia, some of them you can convince them of anything or to do anything or ask them to do something, and they agree, and 2 minutes later they forget. So it makes it really easy to manipulate the situation. Like, I didn't ask you for $1,000 5 minutes ago. I don't know what you're talking about. So things like that happen. The annual losses incurred by older adults who are victims of financial abuse total over $28 billion a year. That's in the United States. Financial abuse extends beyond the immediate losses as well. Family caregivers and social safety net programs often have to assist with paying for care when the older loved ones are exploited, because you're not going to leave mom or dad with nothing because someone stole from them. You're going to open your pocket and take care of them, or you're going to sign them up for services where they get help and assistance that they need. So it affects a lot of people, not just the victim. Prevention. This is tricky. This is the same as the other stuff I talk about. It's knowledge. We need to know what to look for and need to help educate our older relatives what to look for. My best friend's dad, who passed away 8 months ago, anytime he got a phone call or an email from someone looking for money, he gave it to them. Didn't matter who it was. He'd give it to me. And my friend would get so mad at him, like, what are you doing? Well, she was really sweet and she needed it. That's classic. That's what they do. And it would be, someone that was raising funds for some fundraiser or some nonprofit that doesn't exist. Or he was a very well-known golfer. And so they would do a little research first and go, oh, well, this is going to help golfers in your area, or kids get golf lessons. Oh, he could not throw enough money at those people. And then afterwards he would tell her, and then she'd call me and be like, tell Dad what he just did was wrong. Like he's going to listen to me. But I'd be like, stop sending money to strangers. Like, save it for your family or something. Give it to your church. Do, someone that's going to actually do something. Give it to Maria, your daughter, whatever. But he didn't know. And he was always convinced by anything that he got. And he was not a stupid person or unintelligent or naive. He knew, he could read, he could write. He just fell for it every time. And he would say, well, I just have a big heart. Yes, he had a huge heart, but to his own detriment sometimes. So you want to take care of your health. Stay healthy. That's important for everybody. Seek professional help for drug, alcohol, or depression concerns, and urge family members to get help too. Very important. Attend support groups for spouses and learning about domestic violence services, because there's a lot of domestic violence with the elderly, and especially related to dementia. Sometimes the person with dementia gets violent, unfortunately, tragically, and the person that's caring for them has to experience, suffer with that and figure out how to deal with it. So the more education about how to deal with these things, the better. And plan your future. With a power of attorney or living will, you can address healthcare decisions now so there's no confusion later. A lot of elderly people end up with no decisions made for them at all, or they haven't made any of their own decisions at all, and then someone else takes over and things do not go the way they want them to. Seek independent advice from someone you trust before signing any documents. That is huge. These people will get people to sign over, their power of attorney. They'll change their will or their trust to make this person they barely know the executor of their estate. They turn over their bank accounts and their investments to someone they hardly know, because that person convinces them, oh, your family doesn't know what they're doing. They're trying to steal from you. I will protect you. Staying active in the community and connected with friends and family is also a really good idea, because that decreases social isolation, can't talk right now, which has been connected to elder abuse. Because, like I said, lonely, scared, don't know what to do. someone comes over and says, I'll help you. It's just not always the right person that comes over and offers to help. You want to mail, I believe it says posting and opening your own mail. Don't let someone else handle your mail. You need to know what's coming and what's going. Not giving personal information over the phone. We discussed that. Unless it's Carlos calling for your Medicare application. You want to use direct deposit for checks so they can't be stolen, either by a stranger in the mail or by your caregiver. You want to have your own phone. Oftentimes on cases I work, the people don't have a telephone because someone took it from them or they hide it from them. And then when family comes to visit, oh, there's the phone right on the table. You forgot where it was. It's like, no, it wasn't there. And that's so that the people can't call and say, hey, this person's hurting me or starving me or stealing from me. And you want to review your will periodically because some of these people, have the ability to take it and get it changed somehow without you because there are shady attorneys and people that will go along with it. I have a current case where my client's elderly father was coerced into signing paperwork he thought was for a vehicle loan, but it actually changed the terms and the executor of his trust. He didn't read it. Luckily, his daughter found it. But now they're fighting to get it changed back, and that's a whole other challenge because dad has a little bit of dementia. If you're full on dementia, you can't sign a document. So they're trying to, and of course the caregiver person that got him to sign it over saying, oh, he's not capable, he doesn't know what it is. Well, you got him to sign it. I mean, she's the one that did it in the first place. But she's trying to say that, oh, he was okay that day, but now he's worse and you can't sign it. So there's a big old legal battle over that. And you want to know your rights. We want to make sure they know their rights. If you engage the services of a paid or family caregiver, you have a right to voice your preferences and concerns. If you're in a nursing home, call your long-term care ombudsman. I have so much trouble saying that word, ombudsman. They're your advocate and they have the power to intervene. And then here's another, this applies to everybody, all ages, but the elderly are more and more falling victim to these online predators. Like I said, the internet's the worst place for anyone to be. It's replaced the white panel van as far as people getting kidnapped on the street. The internet's much more dangerous. This is how you can spot one almost every time. They have an avatar for their profile photo. Or it's a photo of an insanely beautiful woman who's really young, and she wants to be friends with someone that's 85. That's what we call a red flag. Or a ridiculously handsome guy. It's like, it's kind of obvious. Usually it's a new profile with very few posts. Oftentimes they're in the military or work in the oil industry, or they're widowed. There's this whole little group of them. But very few connections, no mutual friends usually, or there might be one mutual friend. I would never friend someone that has one mutual friend. There's like no way. And they will invite you to leave the app where they first contacted you and go to a private chat. And that happens with kids that are being exploited. It also happens with elderly people. And that's like being kidnapped. It's like if you're grabbed on the street, they say the thing to do is to fight for your life to not be taken to a second location. This is the same thing as being kidnapped, it's just online. So they need to know not to do that. If someone contacts you in Messenger on Facebook and they want to talk, and you really want to talk to that stranger, okay. But don't go to, like they're going to go to Snapchat. Don't go to Snapchat with them or anywhere else. It's just not a good idea. And then privacy settings are super important. And this is for everybody, all ages. I tell anyone that has, grandchildren, don't post pictures of your adorable little grandchildren online publicly. Keep it private. You can post them, but do it private because most of these predators are too lazy to bust through the privacy settings. They can, but they don't want to put forth that much effort. But a simple, well, first of all, friends and followers list should be private on all apps, no matter what. So should photos and videos. The city of residence where you live should also be private. A simple Google search can show so much information. They can do your name, they can look at your family list and do another family member's name, like one of your kids or a grandchild. And it lists everything. It's not always accurate, but it's pretty close on the cases that I've checked. If you like getting those birthday messages, on Facebook that are fun to get, but don't ever put your whole date of birth. Put the month and the day. You still get the messages. The predators are too lazy to do the math and figure out what year you were born. They really are. They don't want to try too hard. They go kind of for what they consider the low-hanging fruit. So they're not going to come after you with just a month and a day. And then romance scams. This is when, like I said, someone that there's just way out of someone's league is hitting on them, love bombing them, instantly, madly in love, and we have to run away and get married right now, 5 minutes after you met. That's kind of a red flag. Especially if, the person that's, being love bombed has a ton of money and the other one doesn't. And then a widower is typically, the scammer is a widower in another country, often employed in the oil industry, or they're a doctor. And there's tons of these. There's one guy in particular that pops up constantly that's obviously a scammer on Facebook. And one time I did a post and I started saving pictures of the guy when I would get a friend request from him. And I think I have like 27 different pictures, different names, the same guy. Some of them he was wearing the same shirt, which was really funny. You'd think he'd at least change his shirt. And so I did a post, and so many people were like, "That's my guy." Yeah, it was it was hilarious. Like everyone's like, "That guy's hit me too." It's just one that's out there. It's been there for years. Well, the same thing happens with some older people too. Usually they're military. There's one guy that wears a shirt that says Petraeus on it. He's clearly not General Petraeus, but he didn't realize he needed to change the name on his shirt. But he hits on a lot of older women. It's very funny. But anyway, it's very obvious. You can spot these if you know what to look for. It's so easy to spot them. Someone will contact a person and just ask them a ton of questions to get to know them. But they never answer a question. So they get to, they ask where you live, what do you like to do, all these your favorite movie, your favorite food, whatever. And you ask back, hey, what's yours? And they just ask a different question. And that's because they're gathering information they can use to try to scam you. And they often do push the victim to get married, to retire early, to change the beneficiary insurance or investment documents. That's what I call a red banner. Don't do that. I had a case not too long ago where a brother called me. He said, you got to check out this guy my sister's dating. She's 67 years old. She wants to do a late retirement. She'd been a school teacher. She wanted to do a late retirement, but she met this guy, and she was just madly in love. Of course, the guy had no money. He had nothing. They were planning a wedding. He convinced her to put the money down on the location for the wedding and put the money down on her wedding dress and said he would go pay for everything when the day came. He convinced her to retire early. She submitted her paperwork to retire and to put money down on a house in a different state. She did all of that. And then the guy just didn't show up. So it was heartbreaking. And her brother all along was like, we don't trust this guy. He's shady. They had met him a few times. And he was very charming, very slick. And, of course he paid for dinner when they all went out together. That was the only time he ever paid for anything. When he went out just with her, she always paid. He had an excuse for everything. But it was a classic scam. He ended up getting about $150,000 in cash out of her. And then she lost all the money for all of the other things. So terrible. And the brother that hired me, he's like, I should have hired you sooner because I do dating backgrounds. So I could have identified this guy, who he really was, and could have checked his background. And he had done this to several other women as well. He was all over the internet. So it wasn't that hard to find him. That's okay. Most of them get away with it. A lot of times the victims are too embarrassed to admit what happened. They just want to go on with their lives. This poor lady went into a deep depression and just, didn't want to see anyone or talk to anyone or do anything for a long time. She finally turned things around. It wasn't her fault. She got totally manipulated. But yeah, once in a while, law enforcement gets involved. If there's enough money involved, law enforcement will pay attention. If there's not, they won't. And by enough, I mean like tens of millions of dollars, basically. It has to be really a lot. Just ruining someone's life isn't enough, unfortunately, which is really sad. But yeah, so romance scams. And another way that's really obvious someone's trying to scam you is if they offer to pay bills or provide you with financial assistance, but first you need to send them some iTunes gift cards. Okay. Right? I have a friend who, a guy she was talking to online was going to send her $50,000 to help her out, but he demanded $500 in iTunes gift cards first. And I was like, don't do that. Just don't do it. And finally, she didn't. We had been trying to convince her for months the guy was a scammer. It's like, he's never asked for anything. Well, he finally did. And it was an iTunes gift card. Some possible signs, just, when you visit someone or see someone, appearance of being over or under medicated, sudden weight loss, complaints of not being given enough to eat, suspicious bruises or injuries, of course, fearfulness. They're often afraid to either, talk to you in front of someone or tell you what's going on. Emotional outbursts when you leave following a visit. And unwillingness to speak with you when the caregiver is present, or a change in their demeanor. Like they go from relaxed and the caregiver walks in, you can tell they're very, very nervous. And then the caregiver often will claim that the victim will claim that they asked the caregiver to purchase items, but they were never received. So they gave them money to go shopping and never got whatever they asked for. And the caregiver just says, oh, no, you didn't. You forgot. You just think you asked me to do that. Changes in shopping patterns, unusual purchases or unpaid bills. I have one client where dad was a multimillionaire and now he's flat broke. And he's got nothing to show for it. Meanwhile, his former caregiver has a lovely home and a nice car and a bunch of diamond jewelry and probably a bunch of investments. Property that should be saved or go to family members disappearing, like, family heirlooms and things like that suddenly disappearing. And, the victim might say, oh, I gave it to her because she really, really loved it. And then secretive behavior. They don't want you to know what's going on because they're embarrassed. Missed or withheld telephone messages. They limit contact with family. I have a case right now where the son went to Texas and got mom and brought her to California, and now will not allow mom's daughters, they're all adults, to talk to her. And they just keep saying she doesn't want to talk to you. Well, a few days ago, she answered the phone and cried and said, oh my gosh, he told me you don't want to talk to me, you don't love me anymore, you hate me, come get me. And then the phone hung up because, he probably walked in the room. So they're trying to figure out now how to get her back. The courts are not helping at all. Not at all. He's been ordered by the courts in Texas 3 different times to produce her, meaning bring her to Texas, and he just doesn't. So terrible. And that's, her loving son who's allegedly caring for her. They might discuss transactions at inappropriate times or give the caregiver access to their bank accounts or power of attorney. You want to make sure that's a family member, a trusted family member, preferably 2 family members as opposed to just one. That's the best way to do that. And then often they'll use their property, their vehicle, their clothing sometimes, jewelry, whatever, without permission. They try to be the victim's only friend so that there's just nobody around, because the fewer people around, the better. They can get away with what they're doing. And then major changes in financial arrangements. Money's gone. So when you suspect something like this going on, visit your loved one, like I said, unexpectedly, especially if they're in a care facility. Pop in at weird hours or times. Don't go at the same time all the time. Gently speak with them if you suspect something's up, and because they probably are embarrassed and they don't want to admit what's going on because they feel stupid, which is terrible. They shouldn't ever. They were manipulated. Encourage them to report the abuse to the authorities. It's hard to get them to do it, especially if it's a family member or if they're really, really afraid of their caregiver. Sometimes they're terrified. It can be reported anonymously in California, which is kind of good. I did an anonymous report on the mom that was taken from Texas. So law enforcement would at least go out and check on her and make sure she's okay. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know they went and checked. They did a wellness check. She's okay physically. And she wants to go to Texas. That's what she told them. But who knows if it'll happen. If the abuse is physical and occurred in a long-term care facility, then you report it to law enforcement and the ombudsman. And a restraining order can be requested to protect an elder or dependent adult from abuse. In Texas case, they have one. Clearly, it's not being adhered to. And these are the contact numbers for the ombudsman offices. I don't know why I can't say that word. And then you want to use a reputable company such as Assisting Hands for caregiving. Yay. If you're going to hire a caregiver, have an in-depth background check conducted on that potential caregiver, not just a referral from a friend or a Google search. We used to have a contractor actually in our BNI chapter who a few years ago hired me to check out a caregiver for his mom. And he said, you know, I Googled her. She had a couple things, but like 15 years ago, so I'm really not worried. But there's still this little, voice in my head that says, call Lynda. So I checked her out. She had been working as a caregiver for 20 years. And during the most recent 7 years, which is as far back as we're allowed to report in California, she had been arrested 8 times for assault and battery, all on the elderly people and for financial elder abuse. So had he just gone on the Google search, he probably would have hired her. So that's why those things need to be done, for sure. And then you want to stay vigilant, obviously, in your interaction with your older adult family members and friends. And if you need any additional help or information, here's my contact information.